The member for Bowman.
Mr Speaker, with the third Closing the Gap report released by the Prime Minister last week, looking out, of course, for outcomes which we are all expecting from these reports and getting little more than inputs, it made me turn my mind to exactly what's happening with the health of Indigenous Australia. In there was just one precious phrase which referred to petrol sniffing and volatiles as having fallen. But apart from that, it was simply 3 years after we first started this process as a parliament, and yet another speech, yet another dusty speech about inputs to the problem and precious little about outcomes. Look, tonight I'd like to focus on housing, because we all know that from employment and housing can come the hope of better health care and better education. But it starts at home with having somewhere safe and somewhere healthy and somewhere inspiring to live. And right now, these, in some ways, impressive amounts of money that are being injected into Indigenous housing is just going the same way as all the money before it, because a simple few essential antecedent factors are being ignored, and that is quite simply how to involve Aboriginal Australia in the construction of their own housing. How has this government turned Indigenous housing into a spectator sport, where they simply watch the white teams roll in, build these houses as quickly as they can and get out as fast as they arrived? As long as Indigenous housing is something that drops in and is left behind with no maintenance plan and no Indigenous crews to look after them, then we have nothing more to look forward to than more degraded housing desperately in need of upgrade. And that can happen within months. These are not small investments, Mr Speaker. We're talking $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, in some remote cases $800,000 for a very, very modest two-bedroom dwelling. And Indigenous families are crying out for a chance not to have 10, 12 or 14 people in those dwellings on average. There are communities that have up to 20. And how can children hope to sleep at night and turn up at school when they live in not only that overcrowding, but squalor? The answer is simple. There are enormous working-age populations in these communities that are simply completely disenfranchised from the idea of being able to move from school and into a reasonable-paying job that has a training component to it and a hope of a future. And the opportunity is right there with a focus on Indigenous housing, but it is being completely lost. And you need to look no further than Wadeye in the Northern Territory, where we see tens of thousands of dollars per day being spent, no, not on the houses, Deputy Speaker, but on the multi-layered consultancies, working out what home design and home colour we want, and not consulting at all about the basic premise: can any of these young Indigenous blokes pick up a spanner and give it a go and work on a housing site under supervision and call that house their own? As if this is some novel idea that has never been thought of nor trialled before. I mean, we have created Mainstream Australia, the only culture in the world that relies on another culture to build shelter for it. Yep. Show me another place in the world where it has come to this. The money is now there, and in the guise of having to rush out the housing as fast as we can, we're not waiting for Aboriginal townships and communities to build those houses and with it gain the experience these young Aboriginal of working age male and females ask, just to have a chance at entering that career. They are not all going to be home builders, Deputy Speaker. They may well move into other areas, but an opportunity to build 20, 40, 100 dwellings. And when that job's finished, start building accommodation for teachers, nurses, doctors and police who work on these communities. Then build the civic centres, but turn it into a revenue model and make these properties valued. And the best way you do that is you write the names of the people who built the houses on them. If you tear those apart, you're tearing down the work of your own brothers and your own skin group. Yep. But no, we don't. We learn no lessons from the past and we forge ahead on this futile scheme of transferring surpluses to large building alliances that, sure, they can engage 1 or 2 or 3 Indigenous workers shovelling some cement or sweeping down the slab. But let's turn it into genuine training opportunities that can lead to a career. Let's not do job capacity assessments for an individual, do them for the entire community, and do not stop until every single working-age Aboriginal person has had a chance, like the rest of us do, to follow a career and build a passion. But something happened in 2008, Mr Speaker, and the member for Gorton removed that tensioning spring, that drive to get involved in community activity, in his communication as the then Minister with his Centrelink line staff. And as we dig deeper, we will find that that act in 2008 did more damage in this area than anything in the last 10 years.
Order.